Hey there, everybody. Steve, the amateur historian. How are you all doing today? Hopefully, still sane. I'm doing the best I can to maintain my sanity as well. And for today's quarantine story, that has nothing to do with quarantining itself. I have a real crazy story here. Now, it's unverified. It's almost more of a conspiracy theory because you kind of have to go on a couple of claims from random people as to whether this actually was the case or not. But it's still kind of a wild story out of the lore of Portland, and specifically from the Albina area, which is just across the river, a little north of downtown Portland. And in Old Town Albina specifically, the White Eagle Saloon. Now, the White Eagle Saloon has, there's more urban legends and, well, likely myths in relation to this place. There's about as many for this place as there is probably any other place in Portland. There's been claims of ghost sightings there. I think on the second floor, there's been claims that it was used as an opium den at one point, that all kinds of vice went on out of there. One of the most prevalent stories to come out of the White Eagle Saloon is that it was used as another place to Shanghai people. The great, the Shanghai tunnels on the west side of the river. There's this great, Shanghaiing history to Portland, that a lot of which is probably didn't actually happen. But that was another thing about the White Eagle Saloon, was it was on the east side of the river, and it was another place, and you could Shanghai people. And some people claim that there was a tunnel that I guess went all the way under the Willamette River, which sounds insane today, much less way back in the day, that you could take them over to the other side of the river to where the actual Shanghai tunnels were more readily located. So the White Eagle Saloon has this kind of crazy wild history, and there's always something that someone wants to add to that. And it's funny because Old Town Albina, I have vlogged in this area so many times. I've done 4 historic murders of Portland episodes there. I did a video where I was just kind of generally passing through and showing the area. So numerous times I've passed by the White Eagle Saloon, but it's never really been a focus for any of those videos I've done, but it's always been in the background. I'm sure there's plenty of clips of it showing up in the background as I'm kind of walking around Albina going somewhere else. So the White Eagle Saloon was built in 1905. It's now 1906, so it's a relatively new building. And Old Town Albina was that general area was predominantly during that time. There was a lot of kind of Northern European people. So there was a decent sized Polish population. There was a decent sized Swedish population. Probably Norwegian. There was a good sized German population. A lot of people just kind of from the northern portion of Europe. That was a lot of the population. And then within about 15 years, the city of Portland kind of conglomerated with real estate people when African American people started moving to the east side, and the white people started freaking out about it. Albina became the place that they said, this is the only place on the east side that African Americans can buy property now. So that's how the general Albina area ultimately kind of became Portland's, so to speak, black neighborhood, because they were essentially forced into it. It was almost legalized segregation, because it was people, not necessarily legislation being passed, but regulations being passed to force a certain race of people to be in only one certain area. So this is before that, when it was still a predominantly white area. And before I get into this particular story, it's important to remember, to this point, I believe 3 presidents had ever been assassinated. Obviously, there's Lincoln, Grover Cleveland, because I'm pretty sure Grover Cleveland. I'm thinking about it. I don't remember if I think Grover Cleveland was pre-1900, but or he was the president. Grover Cleveland was assassinated. All right, and then in '63, Kennedy's assassinated. In 1901, the other president, President William McKinley, was assassinated. And he was assassinated by a man named Leon Czolgosz. That's his name. It's insane the way his name is spelled, but Czolgosz is how I've heard the guy's name pronounced. And he, the assassin of President McKinley, and this is 1901, this is only 5 years before 1906, Czolgosz was an anarchist, self-stated anarchist who had a Polish background. So that kind of combined with the fact that Russia was kind of overrunning Poland at the time, and America, this is way before the Cold War, but America kind of was having their issues with Russia at that time anyway. So the general kind of perspective that Americans had about Polish people, Polish immigrants, Polish refugees that were coming to America was already not that great. They were kind of mushed into the league with being kind of with the Russians, even though a lot of Polish people were angry that Russia had come in and was kind of taking over their country. So there was already, and Leon Czolgosz, a guy with Polish, a Polish background, assassinating one of our presidents didn't help matters. And by 1906, the early years of the White Eagle Saloon, it was predominantly run and used by people of Polish ancestry, Polish immigrants, Polish refugees. And so with that story of McKinley in the back of your mind, just a few years earlier being assassinated by an anarchist of a Polish background, it gets to be, and I had to check the names a little bit because some of them are a little tricky. Okay, so specifically June 20th, 1906, and a man named Henry it's either Lopaski or Lopaski. I'm going with Lopaski. It's Lopaski, and I've seen his name in the various different resources I looked at. I've seen that name spelled differently. Like one, I've seen it end with an I. But I'm going with Lopaski. I may say Lopaski at one time because my brain's probably going to battle between the two. So he goes to the authorities and says that there's anarchists working out of the White Eagle Saloon. The Polish anarchists, once again. And we're only a couple years removed from William McKinley's assassination. And he claims that this underground anarchist organization that's working out of there has threatened his life personally. They told him in 72 hours they said, we're going to kill you like the rat you are, essentially was what they said to Lopaski. So he's scared out of his mind. He goes to the authorities and tells them, and there's actually a story of like the police kind of, I don't know if it was necessarily a raid, but they apparently went to the White Eagle Saloon and did an intense spur-of-the-moment investigation and searched the whole place. And from one of the sources I read, one of the people who searched the area said that they found some very strange, incriminating information, but items at the White Eagle Saloon, but would never say exactly what they were. So it's like, is he telling the truth, or is he just trying to maintain some ruse? We don't know. And there was another guy with him, or another guy that kind of came in with Lopaski, another guy that came out and essentially said there's some shady goings-ons happening over at the White Eagle. And this guy had I'm going to try to pronounce this, Walter Salaswizik. Look at this freaking name. Salaswizik. Walter. I'm just going to call him Walter for the sake of not losing my mind. So this guy Walter also comes in, and he's kind of there to vindicate what Lopaski is telling the authorities and so, it's kind of becoming a big news. But specifically, one of the things that they tell the authorities, and this is kind of the crux of the video, because we don't really know if this was actually happening. Maybe it wasn't, maybe it was, because essentially it was deemed that Lopaski people came out and claimed that Leposky was actually like a Russian agent and was part of the, these Russian agents who were trying to infiltrate refugee communities in the United States, especially ones where there was people like, say from Poland, which of course Albina had that. So his reputation kind of went south really quickly. And pretty much him and Walter, whatever the heck his last name is, within days, like the stuff they were coming out and saying was national news. And then within a week later, everyone just said, no, everything's fine at the White Eagle. Nothing suspicious is going on. There's no crazy anarchist nonsense happening. We're just going to dismiss what these guys said. They're unreliable. And the stories just kind of faded off, and it was never seemed to be really revived. So everything just kind of ended without a lot of resolution. And the idea was that these guys are unreliable, we've decided, so anything they tell us is either exaggerated or more than likely a lie. And maybe they were, and maybe they weren't. One possible motive for Leposky making up the story that these anarchists wanted to kill him was they think that he actually was of prominence at the White Eagle, and he maybe was given the boot and kicked out. So he wanted vengeance by saying, oh, well, they're all trying to kill me, go get them. But, and I'm sorry, it's a long way getting there, but I'm trying to build everything up in reference to, again, McKinley being killed by a Polish anarchist. One of the things that these guys told authorities was that this specific anarchist group operating out of the White Eagle Saloon had planned, it actually had it set. They'd actually hired someone to do the job and had raised the funds to send this individual off to do the job. They had planned an assassination attempt of the new president who had actually taken over after McKinley died, which would be Theodore Roosevelt. That's what they came out and said. And, again, was that a lie? Maybe. We don't really know for absolute certainty. We could have just been saying this because he really wanted the police to go after these guys. So, hey, say he's planning on assassinating the president, and that'll get the police's attention. And that's what really made this thing national news for, couple of days, was all of a sudden there was these claims that there was a conspiracy to assassinate the president of the United States way over on the other side of the country, Washington, D.C., by a group of Polish anarchists working out of a tiny two-story, kind of hotel bar, as it kind of, more or less looks like these days, just in a, town next to Portland, Oregon. And yeah, they even named a guy, again, another name, I'm going to say John Przywara. I'm going to say Przywara was his last name. We got another kind of difficult name here, but I think it's Przywara. And that was the specific Polish immigrant that they said had been brought on to do the job of going to Washington, D.C. and assassinating Teddy Roosevelt. And, obviously the police looked into it, and, again, what they actually did or didn't find when they searched the White Eagle Saloon is still a little bit shrouded in mystery, which either means maybe there was something suspicious there that they kept under wraps, or maybe there was nothing there at all. We just don't know. Again, I'm bringing you something that is more of like a conspiracy theory than an actual true story, but this is something that permeated through the city of Portland and then went nationwide for several days. And when John Przywara came under scrutiny, obviously he had the finger pointed at him. He apparently was kind of unshaken and undaunted. He obviously denied it. I mean, whether he was actually the guy hired to do this or not, he would deny it. And apparently he was just stoic, unshaken. They couldn't shake him. And it just didn't seem to them like he actually was doing this, because he would have caved to whatever police tactics they were using at the time. So they could never really vindicate that. And then, of course, shortly afterwards, Henry Leposky and Walter, that guy, were kind of just deemed to be unreliable, and the whole thing just kind of faded away. So you wonder, like, logistically you think, I mean, if there was a legitimate potential assassination attempt being planned against the President of the United States, you'd think the local authorities, national authorities would come over. They would turn the White Eagle Saloon upside down to find out if this was a credible threat or not, and none of that ever happened. So you think they probably didn't really find anything to vindicate this, but at the same time, you know, the story was blowing up, and then almost as quickly, you know, people got on the horn to the media, and the media quashed the story. Nothing's going on, nothing's happening here, nothing's happening here. So could it have just been the city of Portland trying to, you know, maybe secretly still look into it to make sure there wasn't anything to it, but also trying to make the rest of the world think, no, Portland's okay? Because Portland already had kind of a shaky reputation. A lot of people kind of felt like, you know, once these stories kind of started breaking, you know, national news outlets, you know, newspapers specifically, were saying, you know, Portland's this gross, they're one of the worst places in the country for welcoming and accepting the commies and Russians and so on and so forth. So Portland was already kind of getting, however that came about, they were already kind of getting a bad reputation in relation to this. So the last thing they needed, just constantly knocking at their door every day, the people that ran the city, was this story that some Polish, which again, you know, because people are dumb, people were just associating Polish as kind of being in league with Russians, because Russia was you know, kind of taking over areas like Poland at that time. So a lot of people just kind of interconnected these people from two different countries. So the last thing the city of Portland needed was some Polish anarchists threatening to kill the President of the United States, when almost the same thing had happened just 5 years earlier to the President. So was there anything to it, or was there not? I'm about, let's say 75% of the opinion that this wasn't real and that this was made up by Henry Leposky for whatever his motives specifically were in order to get the police looking at these people. I'm about 75. I don't want to quite say 80% certain that there's absolutely nothing to this. It's hard to say. I'm just going to stick with my 75%. Think that it wasn't really happening. 20% that maybe this was a real thing that was happening, and 5% undecided. Those are my primary results in this thing. But it's still, whether it's real or whether it's not, whether you believe it or not, ooh, that was a Dr. Seuss rhyme right there. It's still a really crazy, interesting story, you know, that it came out of this little, you know, historic building in Old Town Albina that's now part of the McMenamins chain. It's just you know, a nice bar you go to get a drink and watch, you know, musicians perform and stuff like that. That's what it is now. So I thought, well, that's a story I have to bring to you guys. Politics in Portland, it's right up my alley. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. As always, remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, hit up my Patreon if you so choose. Stay safe, stay clean, wash your hands, don't go anywhere near anybody. Because I went on a car ride yesterday, just a couple, like 2 miles that way and back, and there were still so many people out there just walking past each other, walking, you know, behind one another. You know, I saw maybe 100 people on the streets, and maybe 3 of them had face masks on. So, you know, people just still ain't taking this stuff serious. And those are the people that are going to get sick and keep the sickness going and are going to keep us stuck in quarantine for even longer. Like, how much more needs to happen before you take this seriously? Anyway, that's a complaint for another day. Just be smart, be clean, keep your health together, because if you take care of your health, you're not going to impede other people's health. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Steve, the Amateur Historian.